Welcome back to the DSR channel, where the goal is to make D&D more fun and accessible to more people so that more people are playing it, because D&D is good for you. I do this by trying to demystify rules, giving advice on role play and advice for using the rules of the game in simpler and I think more effective ways, get more bang for your buck, and also rating things by functional category, so that when you're like making characters, you don't have to read every feat in the game, you don't have to read every spell in the game. You can just kind of like filter down in the Google Sheet I give you access to in every one of my videos. Look at the link in the description. You can just filter down to the kind of things you're looking for, like what functional category you're wanting to achieve. In this video, I want to present the first version of this pre-UA Swashbuckler idea that there's a idea that I came up with where we'll like craft the version of the Swashbuckler that we want to see, and if hopefully they give us a UA on it, we can give this all consistent feedback, which will make them more likely to listen to our feedback if it's consistent and there's hundreds or thousands of people giving the same feedback. Okay. So I've taken the latest version of the Swashbuckler UA we got with Playtest 6 for the Player's Handbook 2024 version, and merged that with all the great ideas that you all had, and we put it together. And this can be version 1 that I'm going to present. And I'm going to open a poll on it so we can start voting. Is this good enough? Is this not good enough? Do we want to change some things? And I'll link the poll in the description. I think I can do that. And then I'll link to the video in the poll as well, so they'll link to each other. And the idea here is being that we're going to make D&D better by not allowing the banneret to happen again, right? Like, it is unfortunate that we had this subclass that had potential and could have been something great, and it just came out as garbage. So let's not let that happen again. So, especially to the Swashbuckler, which is one of our favorites. Okay, up on the screen here, I've got on the left, this is the Playtest 6 for the Player's Handbook for 2024 that we got in 2023. And this is the last version of a UA that we saw for the Swashbuckler, okay? And on the right, I've taken all the ideas that we put in, I've merged it with this version of the Swashbuckler and tried to boil it down to some sort of middle ground of still leveraging the cool ideas we had, but making it simple enough to play, not too complex, and also trying to keep in line with what appears to be their thinking, the latest version of their thought process and design approach for the Swashbuckler that we saw here. Okay, so you can see that they left in the third level feature, Fancy Footwork, basically completely as is, and I am proposing that we remove that. I know, wait, hear me out. So I know this is a feature that people like. It's a great feature. It works like how the speedy feat, well, it was called mobile feat, used to work. It's easy to use and convenient, but it, first of all, in this version or in the 2014, doubled down on a feature that the rogue already had, which is cunning action to take a disengage, right? So what this did was allow you to essentially more or less disengage without spending your bonus action, which made a lot of sense. And if you look at the first version of the Swashbuckler, which we got in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, they explained their reasoning for this. The reasoning was they wanted the Swashbuckler to lean into two-weapon fighting, and to do that, they needed their bonus action for the second attack, right? So they gave them this Fancy Footwork feature on purpose so that they could have their bonus action available to make a offhand attack. However, in 2024, we've got the Nick weapon mastery. Rogues have access to it, and that allows you to make your offhand attack as part of your action now. So you no longer need to free up your bonus action for that. Also, we have the Rogue base class feature of Cunning Strike with the withdraw option, and that also lets us spend 1d6 of our sneak attack to move half our speed without provoking an opportunity attack. So if you run up to somebody, sneak attack them, and then you can do this and just get away without spending any action economy. So you still have your bonus action free. So yes, Fancy Footwork still adds value, but if you start adding up the Venn diagram of how cunning action, disengage, and withdraw work, plus Nick removing the need for the core reason they designed this into it, I say we remove it, free that up, because it's only slightly better than withdraw. Free that up so that we can add, so we free up some power budget to add something else to this. And what I would propose that we replace it with is two features. I'm going to call Born to the Sea, but I would be open to other ideas that fit that name better. I am not the most creative person. And in this one, you're going to get your proficiency with navigator's tools. Very flavorful, nice little ribbon, I think. It actually comes in quite useful depending on how the DM runs. Uh, um, I'm going to call it travel checks because I have a video on travel checks. That's how I leverage, things like navigator's tools, cartographer tools, the survival proficiency, and all things like that. So if you have a DM that's not really ever calling for those checks, maybe send that video to them, the travel check video, or is it wisdom checks? I'll have to look at. I'll link it. Okay. So it can be more than just a ribbon if the DM plays it that way. And then you gain proficiency in acrobatics, athletics, deception, performance, or persuasion. You only get one proficiency, but you can choose from those. Those are already on, I believe all of those are on the rogue class list, and we're just going to essentially give you one more of those, which I think makes sense. They're thematic. It's a swashbuckler. So that's kind of a ribbonish feature. Again, both of those things might be a ribbon if your DM just doesn't use ability checks very often, or they might be fairly useful if your DM uses those often, which is how I do it. Like I call for lots of ability checks. And if you watch Deborah Ann Wall DMing, you can see that she calls for lots of ability checks too. And no, it doesn't interrupt the flow of the game, right? Just do it like she does, where they say, "Can I do this?" And she says, "Yep, roll this," and they roll it. It's actually more engaging instead of less engaging. So she's the perfect example of how to do that. Still bringing in the mechanics of the game, making them impactful and useful, but doing it in a way that enhances roleplay. All right, and then we are also going to add another feature called Duelist. They had this feature at 17 called Master Duelist, and I think we still want to keep that kind of concept and name around. So I'm just going to call this Duelist. It's going to give you a couple of things. One, while you're wearing no armor and not using a shield, your AC is 10 plus your Dex mod plus your Charisma mod. If you're going to make Charisma important to a subclass that isn't important to the base class, I think you need to revisit it multiple times, lean into it a few times so that it feels more worthwhile to invest in your Charisma score. Especially if that's not one of your like primary or secondary ability scores for the base class already. And then you're also going to get a fighting style. Okay, the fighting style will be dueling or two-weapon fighting, much like the Swords Bard. But I wanted to add a little bit more to each of those. So if you choose the dueling fighting style and you are fighting with one finesse melee weapon and no shield, you add 1 to your AC. So you kind of get the benefit of the defense fighting style on top of this dueling fighting style. But you can't be holding another weapon, and you can't be holding a shield. So you can't double down on multi-class, get a shield, and then use this with that. No, you have to not be using a shield and only holding one finesse weapon. I think it fits for their fighting style and was thematic. No, you're not super powerful, and it doesn't stack with any other things, but it will be meaningful if you lean into this fighting style. And the other option is if you choose two-weapon fighting style, you can two-weapon fight with one rapier and either one dagger or one hand crossbow. I wanted to add pistol to that list, but pistol doesn't have the light weapon property. So you see right here. So only hand crossbow has the light weapon property, so we would have to do even more to make it work with a pistol. And I didn't want to just say, well, you can use a rapier instead of one of the weapons, because then they could use rapier and a scimitar, rapier and a short sword. And I didn't want to do that. I really just wanted to lean in and make it possible to play that fighting style of rapier and like a main gauche. I don't know how to say that right. Sorry, French people, if I'm butchering that. I probably am. Main gauche, maybe. Or a parrying dagger or things like that. Sometimes you could have something called a sword breaker. So I wanted to enable that kind of fighting style. And then Rakish Audacity, leave it alone. I think it's fine as is. We're not going to touch that. Keep it. Moving on to level 9, you see that they added 2 Cunning Strike options and took the old version of Panache that was in 2014 and turned it into 2 Cunning Strikes. So the 2 options are Goad and Awe. Goad is essentially a taunt, but it also prevents them from making opportunity attacks against anyone other than you. It costs 1d6. Awe is the charm version. It takes 3d6, so it's way more expensive. But the upside, the benefit you get there, is that it's every creature of your choice within 30 feet. And they make a wisdom save or you charm them. So since it's every creature, I guess that's okay. And it still only lasts till the end of your next turn. And Goad only lasts until the end of the target's next turn. That's pretty standard. Goad's pretty standard for a taunt, soft taunt-like ability. Awe is an interesting one, and it yet gives you one more way where you could run up, attack, and get away without spending any action economy for a bonus action disengage or even spending for a withdraw. Because if you charm the person you just hit, even though you walk away, that would trigger an opportunity attack, but it can't attack you because they're charmed by you. That is one of the, that's one of the parts of the charmed condition. They can't attack you. So this is interesting. It's expensive. If there's only the one target, I would always use withdraw instead of this. But if there's a room full of creatures, or you've run into melee and there's like 5 or 6 creatures that might opportunity attack you, you use this, and then you can just walk away from all of them. So it's better than withdraw in that sense, because withdraw only works on the one you hit with the sneak attack. So I like that, but I don't think these are very powerful. These certainly don't stand up to like what the Scion gets at 9th level with its Terrify option, which is causing the frightened condition, and as long as they're frightened by you this way, you have advantage on every attack, right? That is way stronger than either one of these. So I think what we do is we're going to add another feature, like leave both of those as is, and add another feature, which is just simply extra attack. Yep, you get 2 attacks instead of 1 when you take the attack action. I like that because it synergizes with dueling, right? Because dueling with now is going to add, well, dueling adds +2 to your attack, right? And when you make 2 attacks now, you're going to get that twice. So that synergizes with dueling nicely. It doesn't synergize particularly with 2-weapon fighting, because that's a separate attack, and that doesn't benefit from extra attack. Now, your character still benefits from extra attack, and this is nice because you can just set yourself up. So if you're fighting with just a rapier and not that offhand, like most rogues are going to need to do, right? They want to set themselves up for their own sneak attack. So they're going to have a Vex weapon and then a Nick weapon and set themselves up for their own sneak attack, which you're probably going to feel a lot of pressure to do anyway, except you have Rakish Audacity, which means you don't need that, right? Because you can still get a sneak attack as long as there's no one else around no allies around and no enemies around. It's just the 2 of you and you're kind of dueling. Then you don't need advantage to qualify for sneak attack. So you still might use the dueling fighting style. But at level 9, if you get extra attack, you can just set yourself up with a rapier and not have to worry about landing or getting a nick attack. So you can just, on your first attack, maybe you don't have advantage, you make the attack, great. And now that you've hit them with a Vex weapon, you now get advantage on the second attack, which would then give you sneak attack, and now you can just do that for yourself. So I wish we could do this at level 6. I feel like that's what they deserve, but rogues do not get a subclass feature at level 6. It's only 3 and 9, and 3 is way too early for them to get extra attack. So I think we just add it at level 9. And I know some of the other, classes that don't have a base, extra attack as part of the base class, they're getting only extra attack as a subclass feature about this time. But the Bladesinger and Valor Bard both get the ability to replace one of those attacks with a casting of a cantrip. We're not a caster, so we can't do that. So getting those 2 different options for Cunning Strike, that neither of which are very powerful, feels like a good balance, right? Because they're just additional options, right? They're not things you can do on top of everything else. It's just 2 different ways to use this one feature, your Cunning Strike feature that you have. So you're more flexible, not more powerful from those. Whereas extra attack is going to add a little bit of power. And it's not a huge amount of power because you're a rogue, right? With a rogue, your main damage, most of your damage comes from just landing that sneak attack. And so getting another extra attack is going to add a little more damage, but not a huge amount of damage, not like other martial classes, okay? So it's not nearly as powerful. So it feels okay, right? If this were the only thing you got at level 9, I would say this is a letdown. So I think it's a nice balance, right? The couple of the Cunning Strikes that are not very strong, and an extra attack that actually is not as strong for you as it is for any other subclass that's giving their base class extra attack. This feels about the right kind of level of balance. Moving now to level 13, what we had here before was Dashing Strikes, which just gives you 2 more Cunning Strike options. One is Parrying Stance, costs 2d6, and lets you roll a 1d6 and add that to your AC until the start of your next turn. And then you had Invigorate, costs 2d6, and you choose 1 creature within 30 feet of yourself until the end of that creature's next turn. Whenever it makes an attack roll or saving throw, it can add a d6, roll a d6, and add the number rolled to the attack or saving throw. So it's a little bit like a Bless for 1 round, or specifically 1 turn for that creature until the end of its next turn. But it's a d6 instead of a d4. That's kind of a cool idea. I do like the idea and theme of the Swashbuckler encouraging their allies. That's why you can see on the list of features I added, because people talked about, we should give them Battle Master maneuver type things, which I thought was a good idea. And one of the maneuver options I added to the list was they could do the rally. And that was the idea. It was like they're encouraging their allies by rallying them. But the way the mechanics for this is all coming together, what you have is a lot of features that are turning you into a frontliner, right? Goad is a frontliner thing. Like that's a tanking feature. We're going to give you boosted AC. We're going to increase your damage on the front lines. We're going to, give you the ability to sneak attack while you're on the front lines by yourself. So there's a lot of frontliner type features we're putting together here, and then we're throwing this in, which is a support feature, which comes at the cost of being a frontliner because it's reducing your damage, and it just doesn't fit as the mechanical theme. It fits the flavor theme of this subclass, but it doesn't fit the mechanical theme of this subclass, and actually comes at the expense of leaning into the mechanical theme. So I propose that we remove that one. So we're going to remove Invigorate. We're going to leave Parrying Stance as a Cunning Strike option. And instead of Invigorate, we're going to add not another Cunning Strike option, because just getting more and more Cunning Strike options, like I said, isn't adding more power. It's just adding more flexibility to this one feature you have, Cunning Strike. So let's give them something that really adds power. And it's been a while since we did a charisma thing, right? We need to hit the charisma button once more time. I felt like. So the idea here is I came up with this idea of this feature called Elegant Strikes, and you just add your charisma modifier to your weapon attacks. So this is going to synergize well with your extra attack, because each attack is going to benefit your. It's going to synergize great with your 2-weapon fighting, because your offhand attack is going to benefit from this. And if you get a reaction attack, which rogues love to do, it's going to add to that. It's not a ton. It's not as much damage as, say, like if you did something like this on a fighter who has 4 or 8 or 10 attacks in a round. You're going to have 2, 3, maybe 4 attacks in a round. So this is going to help, right? And it really, if you're going to need to lean into charisma, let's make it worthwhile to really invest in your charisma score, especially if you're not getting spell casting with your charisma score. Okay. So I like that. And then level 17 had this Master Duelist feature, which was immediately after you use your sneak attack, you can make another attack against the same target, provided you are within 5 feet of it and no other creatures are within 5 feet of you. So this is kind of like leaning into that dueling thing, right? It's the same kind of conditions that you needed for your Rakish Audacity, where if no one else is around the two of you, it's just the two of you, no one else is within 5 feet, then you can qualify for sneak attack. And this is the same conditions. So same conditions, and if you do land that sneak attack, you get another attack. The problem is getting another attack, just adding another attack like this, you're sacrificing, well, you're not sacrificing anything, right? Because it's just use sneak attack. It just gives you another attack after, which is going to add like another D6 plus your dexterity modifier, which is just disappointing as a level 17 feature, I think, right? And I feel like we've already achieved what we want here, which is, yes, the Swashbuckler Rogue is the most, I feel like, martial of all the thieves, of all the rogue subclasses. So that one should have extra attack and have ways to make more attacks. And we just gave it extra attack. Nice, simple, clean, straightforward, right? So I don't think that's the right thing at this level. So instead, I propose we get rid of Master Duelist and replace it with Uncanny Retaliation, which a lot of people loved as I went through the different options of features. I think that one got unanimously, everybody was a thumbs up on it, and nobody gave it a thumbs down. And I'm going to change the name to Uncanny Retaliation. Previously, I called it Uncanny Riposte, but I like following conventions in the game. I think, and in anything, right? The more you follow a convention, the easier it is for everyone to understand, right? And if you go against convention, especially when we're talking about rule mechanics. Now, when you're talking storytelling, going against convention is great. When you're talking about rules, mechanics, and things that people have to remember, going with convention is far better. And here's the thing, right? Riposte from the Fighter Battlemaster maneuver triggers when a creature misses you. Okay, but if we're going to combine this thing with the rogue's Uncanny Dodge, by definition, they've already hit you. Okay, so if you look at Zentarum Tactics, that one's called Retaliate, and this one is immediately after a creature hits you. So if we want to follow that convention, it should be retaliation. So Uncanny Retaliation. The idea being here is that when you use Uncanny Dodge, you can also, as part of that same reaction, make a melee attack against the creature that hit you. So you're cutting the damage in half and getting a reaction attack. Now, you're not getting more reaction attacks, right? You still have one reaction per round. But what this does is it makes it far easier for you to qualify for that reaction attack. I do wish we could fit this in at a higher or earlier level, so a lower level. Because this comes on so late, you're going to still be incentivized to get like Sentinel and Zentarum Tactics, and then you get this, which is probably better than both of those. Well, it's better than Zentarm Tactics. But it, mutually exclusive trigger with Sentinel. So maybe you still want Sentinel, but not Zentarm Tactics. So I guess that works okay, right? Now you don't feel quite as much pressure to get Zentarm Tactics like all the other rogues do. And it works with your Uncanny Dodge, which Uncanny Dodge I'm finding with all the players who are using rogues, and I see a lot of rogues, is that Uncanny Dodge is just very weak, especially since it contends with that reaction, which you really need to keep your damage on par with other marshals. So you don't want to give it up to just cut one attack's damage in half because it only triggers on attacks, not like big blast spells. So this brings Uncanny Dodge back into being something that's kind of interesting and useful because it no longer contends with your reaction attack that you need, and you get both of them. So I thought that was cool. A lot of people thought it was cool. Yeah, so we'll make that your level 17 feature. All right, and that is it for this version of the Swashbuckler that we might give in our feedback in the UA. And I'll remind you the idea here is so please vote in the polling. And if you're like, yes, thumbs up, then that means this one's good as is. You don't need any more tweaks, and you would happily present, this in your feedback if we get a UA on the Swashbuckler. I'm gonna give a couple other options like no, need some tweaking, or no, you totally ruined it, Bruce. Start over, right? I'll have some options like that. And if you choose one of those, then put in some comments to help explain, right? Because just saying that doesn't help me know what to do with this to make it, something that you would back. But that is the idea, right? We're trying to align on something that we, or many of us, hopefully, all feel like, yes, I would back this and put it in as my feedback for a UA. And that way there'll be hundreds of us or thousands of us giving the same feedback. And then they'll be like, wow, I keep seeing the same thing over and over again. Let's do that. And then we can prevent the banneret. Friends don't let friends let the banneret happen again. But yeah, thanks for watching. I do have links. If you don't have enough D&D in your life, you can find me on Discord. My username is in the description. You can find me on Start Playing Games. There's a link in there for the Google Sheet that I use for a lot of things. In fact, this Google Sheet, it's this one Google Sheet to rule them all. So all of my stuff is in this one Google Sheet. This stuff I presented here for the Swashbuckler is in that Google Sheet. It's in the pre-UA tab. You can go look at it there offline. You don't need to join a Patreon or anything. I don't even have a Patreon yet. Thanks for watching. Remember to be cool when you play D&D because it's a game. This literally the point of it is for fun, and these people are your friends, or they could become your friends. Okay. Catch you next time.